John Machota covers the Cowboys for The Athletic. We'll talk about the draft here in a minute, John, but first the news of the day. Zeke is back. It doesn't exactly electrify the fan base. Why are the Cowboys bringing him back?
Yeah, it doesn't hit like it did in 2016,
No.
That's for sure. I think they're bringing him back because they need help in the running back room, and I do think they look at him as a guy that could bring leadership to them. You know, he was a guy that is very well respected in that locker room, is still friends with a lot of guys in that locker room. And it's a running back room that I think could welcome some leadership, because right now it's just kind of an open competition. You know, if you want, you can probably try out.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's at a spot where I would not be surprised if this season, you tell me at the end of the year that the leading rusher on the Dallas Cowboys isn't even on the roster right now. It wouldn't surprise me. It might be somebody that they get during the season.
Yeah, I was going to ask, other than leadership, what will his role be? But I guess it's impossible to know now. As we speak, he is the lead back for the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry said as much, that he thinks he still has that in him, right?
I mean, I look down the depth chart, and you have Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, Malik Davis, Deuce Vaughn. I mean, they just signed Royce Freeman. He's got as good a chance as anybody, Zeke does, in getting the most carries and toting the rock as most out of anybody on that team. And if you look at the way he played in New England, I don't know that you see a guy that, oh, this is the guy that needs to be the lead back. Jerry believes that, and I don't know if he does necessarily, if he was just saying that or he really truly does believe that. But I don't think that they're settled at running back. I think that there's another move to be made there.
Zeke will be 29 when the season starts next year. Very little free agent activity for the Cowboys, of course. We wait on the Dak deal and the CeeDee Lamb deal and potentially the Parsons deal to get done. How do you see that stuff playing out?
CD would be the one that I think is the most likely to get done. I think that he would be the closest, just because I don't know what else he has to show. Every one of these years he's been on the team, all 4 seasons, he's improved in all areas, and you can just see it when you look at his stats. And in all the areas, the targets, the catches, yards, touchdowns, he absolutely belongs up there with the top receivers and what they should be paid. That, to me, is the no-brainer. But Jerry says he wants to see more leaves to fall with him. I feel like, or with the contracts in general, I think with CD, Jerry wants to see more leaves to fall in terms of other wide receivers. I'm starting to think that Jerry wants to see more of Dak on the field, and it would not surprise me if Dak goes into this final year of his contract and nothing is done, which would have surprised me a year ago to say this, you know?
I was going to say the same thing. I've just assumed all along that was going to happen, but obviously the longer it goes without it happening, the higher the chances are of them just going into the season as it is. He goes into the final year of his deal. Dak's going to get paid somewhere eventually, and to think that it might not be here is kind of a stunner.
Actions speak louder than words, and their actions are that nothing's been done. There's not been any substantial talks. When we most recently talked to Dak a couple weeks ago, he said that there had not been any, quote, real talks. And so if there aren't any of those, what are you waiting for unless you are willing to have them play it out? And I always think this, too, with Jerry. I do believe that he feels like if Dak goes out there and has a great season, that even if there is a bidding war for him and he was to reach free agency, I believe Jerry thinks that Dak will ultimately pick the Cowboys. I think that he thinks if it comes down to us or them, as long as the money's right, obviously, I don't think that he thinks that a franchise quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys will go somewhere else as opposed to being the Cowboys franchise
But still, when you think of Dak's most recent public comments, it's not a coincidence that the tone was the way that it was from Dak, right?
100%.
You know, it may be a little strong to say he was negotiating through the media, but he was very pointed in the comments he made.
When I left that group interview, that's the first thing I thought of out of that. I think it was about 6-7 minutes talking to him. That was the number one thing that stood out to me. I was like, we've never heard Dak really like that, because Dak is notorious for, he always says the right thing. And he obviously talks a lot. He's the franchise quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, but he always says, and when I say the right thing, I mean the right team thing, the right thing that you're supposed to say or whatever. But for him, I thought what he said was right for him. He should say that, because he has done enough that he deserves to be paid like one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And it might not be for the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe it would be for somebody else. But you look at how teams were trying to get those quarterbacks in the draft, there will be at least 5 and probably more teams that would gladly like to take on Dak Prescott in a large salary.
Let's talk draft. The Cowboys hope to fortify their offensive line. They go with Oklahoma tackle Tyler Guyton in the first round, Cooper Beebe of K-State in the third round, who will likely be their center for a little while anyway. I guess if both are legit starters, John, out of the gate, then this could be considered a success. But I think anything less than that, and you have to question the wisdom of taking these guys.
Absolutely. But I look at from the way the season ended, I think that that's, to me, is the worst loss in Cowboys franchise history. And between that, Jerry saying the all-in stuff over and over again, not doing anything in free agency, the Cowboys have left themselves in a spot where it's been very easy to be very negative about the Dallas Cowboys. But I will say that even the most negative person has to say that they did a great job with that 24th pick. To turn that into what they did, the harshest of critics has to say, well, I mean, if you can do that, I mean, it's hard to give him anything but an A for that. I mean, you got a guy that you could have taken easily at 24 and just stayed there. To get not just a third-round pick, but an early third that you turn into another offensive lineman that I feel like even if it doesn't work out at center, that could potentially be Zach Martin's heir apparent in maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years from now at right guard. And so the other thing is you have to give the Cowboys the benefit of the doubt when it comes to drafting offensive linemen, particularly in the first round. Defensive tackle, it's another story. But for offensive linemen, I mean, they do it as well as anybody. So I think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
Marshawn Nealon, the defensive lineman from Western Michigan, in the second round, a lot of people are really praising that pick as a guy who maybe is a first-round talent.
For sure, and there's a lot about him that, you know, when you talk to a Will McClay, like after that second and third round is over, they talk about how he's got a lot of the DeMarcus Lawrence to him, you know, where he can step in. I mean, he's got all the measurables, but he's also got the work ethic. He's got the right mentality. He doesn't take plays off. A leader type like that, where I think some people probably don't know him just because he went to Western Michigan. But I think because of the similarities to Lawrence, I think it's just a natural, you know, why don't we plug this guy in now? He can learn behind Lawrence, and maybe he's the guy in the future, because DN was a sneaky need for them because of Lawrence being in the final year of his deal. And when they went on the clock at 24, there were 4 players they were considering, and one of them was a defensive end who ended up getting drafted right before they went on the clock and took Guyton. So they were thinking defensive end early, and I think when Nealon was on the board, I think it was just kind of a no-brainer. Let's do this right now. It's the best player available by far.
We talked about Zeke last segment, and it still really surprises me that they honestly feel that all 8 players they picked are more valuable than a running back might have been. I think it's somewhat inexcusable to not pick a running back in the position the Cowboys are in, but time will tell on that. And John Machota will be around to criticize every move the Cowboys make here between now and the beginning of training camp, I guess, which will be here before we know it. John, always appreciate you coming in. Thanks.
Thanks for having me on.